Black woman handcuffed at Jetway, then the airline CEO calls her directly to apologize. Have you ever witnessed an injustice so shocking that it made your heart pound in your chest? What if it happened to you right at the Jetway, of all places, when you were just trying to board your flight and head home? This story follows the unimaginable ordeal of Mariah Benson, a smart, successful black woman wrongfully handcuffed in public before dozens of onlookers. Accusations flew, tensions soared. Everyone questioned what was true, yet the most unbelievable turn of events came moments later when the CEO of Delta Airlines himself made a personal phone call that would change her life forever. Mariah Benson was the type of woman who walked into a room and commanded attention without saying a word. Her mere presence radiated confidence. Tall, elegant, with warm brown skin and curly black hair that cascaded just below her shoulders. She had an easy smile that put people at ease, but also let them know she was a force to be reckoned with. At just 28 years old, Mariah had recently been promoted to senior marketing manager at one of the fastest-growing tech startups on the West Coast. She was on her way back from a high-stakes business conference in New York, having sealed a lucrative deal that would put her company on the map in major East Coast markets. Her flight was out of John F. Kennedy International Airport Terminal 4, Gate B32, to be exact. While others around her scrolled aimlessly on their phones, napped, or flipped through glossy magazines, Mariah was making final edits to a pitch deck on her laptop. She thrived on efficiency. Yet behind her poised exterior, she was physically drained. Weeks of negotiations, late nights, and cross-country flights had taken a toll. Just make it home in one piece, she told herself. She had big plans for a restful weekend, a spa day with her best friend, a long catch-up brunch with her younger sister, and maybe a lazy Sunday morning to binge-watch her favorite shows. Little did she know, none of that was going to happen smoothly. 40 minutes before her flight, the gate area had mostly filled up with travelers from all walks of life. Families with kids rummaging through their backpacks, business people tapping away on laptops, older couples clutching boarding passes and passports. Mariah stretched her legs and planned a quick bathroom break. While gathering her purse and laptop bag, she noticed a security officer, presumably from the Transportation Security Administration (TSA), scanning the waiting area, their eyes briefly locked. Mariah gave a polite nod, but the officer's gaze lingered on her. She felt a subtle disquiet, but she brushed it off. A gate agent made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin pre-boarding for our flight to Los Angeles shortly. Please have your boarding passes ready." Mariah stood up and joined the lines forming to the side. She was in Zone 1 courtesy of her business class seat, one of the few perks she enjoyed traveling for work. The line advanced in an orderly manner, or so she thought. Suddenly, the same TSA officer approached the gate agent, whispering something. The agent's eyes flicked in Mariah's direction. A ripple of unease spread through the passengers who noticed. Mariah felt her pulse quicken, though she maintained an outward calm. She asked herself if she had any liquids in her bag, or if she might have inadvertently left something suspicious in her carry-on. Nothing came to mind. Just as Mariah reached the gate agent to scan her boarding pass, the agent hesitated and fiddled with the computer. Then, in a gentle but firm voice, the agent said, "Amaya AM, would you mind stepping to the side for a moment?" Confused, Mariah replied, "Is there something wrong with my boarding pass?" "We're just verifying a security alert." "Standard procedure," said the agent with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mariah was ushered down the jetway, but instead of heading directly into the plane, she was asked to stand near the wall. The security officer from earlier appeared again, this time with two others in uniform. Suddenly, the space felt charged with tension. Their body language was tense, and they positioned themselves in a semicircle around her. Is there a problem? Mariah asked, her voice steady though her stomach was churning with anxiety. May I see your ID, please? The lead officer asked. He wore a name badge that read Officer J. Powell. Mariah complied, handing over her driver's license. She noticed small beads of sweat forming at her temples. The atmosphere was stifling, and she could hear the hum of the plane's air conditioning drifting out from the cabin ahead, promising respite she wasn't sure she'd receive. Officer Powell scrutinized her ID, checked it against a tablet screen, and then flicked his eyes over to Mariah's face. We received a report matching your description. A passenger was allegedly spotted engaging in suspicious behavior in the terminal. We need to do a quick check. Mariah's mind whirred. Suspicious behavior. She'd been sitting quietly, working on her laptop. I'm not sure what you're referring to, officer. I've just been waiting for my flight, she said, forcing a level tone. She willed her face to stay calm. This is just a misunderstanding, she told herself. The other two officers looked at each other, uncertain. In that moment, a gate supervisor stepped onto the jetway, likely alerted that something was up. A small crowd of curious passengers, now blocked from entering the plane, were craning their necks to see what was happening. Some murmured among themselves, speculating about everything from terrorism to a stolen passport. The tension thickened. Then, in a move that would change the trajectory of Mariah's day and her entire sense of personal safety, Officer Powell looked back at the tablet. Ma'am, we have reason to believe you may be carrying contraband. I'm going to have to place you in restraints while we verify. Please turn around. Mariah blinked in shock. Contraband? She repeated in disbelief, her heart hammered. I don't understand. I have nothing like that on me. You can search my bag. This has to be a mistake. Several seconds of taut silence passed, pregnant with the potential for escalation. The officer's hand moved to the cuffs at his belt. MAAM, this is for our safety and yours. Turn around. Place your hands behind your back. Mariah could hear her own pulse pounding in her ears. She felt the eyes of bystanders boring into her. She managed to say, I'll comply, but I want it on record that I'm being detained without probable cause. Her voice cracked slightly, betraying her fear. The officer's hands encircled her wrists with cold metal handcuffs, snapping them shut. In that instant, the reality of the situation sank in. She, a law-abiding professional about to board a flight home, was being handcuffed in front of a gawking crowd for reasons that made no sense. Time slowed. The swirl of voices, the stares, the humiliating nature of having her wrists pinned behind her. Mariah felt an acute sting of injustice. She'd read about racially charged incidents at airports and on flights, but never in her worst nightmares did she imagine becoming a headline. Passengers pulled out their phones to record videos. Someone gasped audibly, "She's just a young woman. What did she do?" Another voice chimed in, "This is insane." A mother pulled her curious child back, shielding them from the scene. The gate supervisor tried to keep order, but the tension was uncontainable. Officer Powell pulled Mariah to the side, closer to the wall, away from the plane's entrance, while the two other officers hovered. The entire fiasco was blocking the jetway. People in the line groaned and complained, while others watched as if enthralled by a live drama. "Your name is flagged in our system," was all the officer would say. "What system?" Mariah demanded, her frustration giving rise to anger. "I'm not a criminal. Check my bag. Do whatever you need to do, but this is ridiculous." Her eyes darted to the gate supervisor, seeking a modicum of sympathy or intervention, but the supervisor looked nervous, uncertain how to proceed. "I need to call a manager," the supervisor muttered and hurried away. Mariah took a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. She considered how an experience like this could mar her reputation. Mentally, she also prepared for the possibility of missing this flight. An avalanche of thoughts collided in her mind, from how she would explain this to her boss to how she would contact a lawyer if necessary. A commotion among the passengers erupted behind them. "This is not right," shouted a middle-aged black man holding his phone camera up. "She just went through security like everyone else. You have no right to single her out." A couple of other passengers added supportive comments, while a few looked terrified or uncertain. Mariah locked eyes with the man. She felt an unexpected flush of gratitude. She was still reeling from the humiliation, but the fact that at least one voice was openly questioning the fiasco gave her a faint sense of solace. One of the officers snapped, "Sir, step back!" But the man kept filming from a distance. He made sure the entire scene was documented: Mariah's cuffed hands, her pained expression, the officer's stony demeanor. Before long, more phones were up, capturing the moment. "You can't treat people like this without evidence," someone else yelled. Anxiety soared among the remaining travelers. A few people demanded that the flight board as scheduled, while others insisted the airline owed Mariah an immediate explanation. Airport staff tried to keep order, but the crowd's tension escalated. Everyone could sense that something was deeply off. "MAAM," Officer Powell said, sounding more uncertain than before. "We need to take you back to security for a private screening. We can't do it here." At the mention of a private screening, Mariah's anger flared. "No," she asserted, her voice clear. "If you're going to accuse me of something, do it in front of all these witnesses. I have nothing to hide." But the officer was already signaling to the others. They began guiding Mariah back up the jetway toward the main terminal area. Passengers parted like the Red Sea, stepping aside, still filming. She felt light-headed, a surreal sense that this couldn't possibly be happening to her. Yet, the cold bite of the cuffs reminded her it was all too real. It took another 20 minutes before they reached a private screening room near the security checkpoint. Mariah found herself standing in a stark, windowless room with a metal table. A female officer arrived to conduct a pat-down. All the while, Mariah's mind roared with indignation. She prayed they wouldn't escalate this further. "MAM, do you have anything sharp? Any prohibited items?" the female officer asked. "Only my dignity, which is apparently not welcome here," Mariah snapped, no longer bothering to hide her frustration. She immediately regretted her tone, worried it might provoke them. But she'd had enough. While the pat-down commenced, Officer Powell stepped aside to speak into a walkie-talkie. Mariah strained to catch snippets of the conversation. She heard words like possible misidentification and update from Central. This gave her hope. Perhaps they were finally realizing their mistake. She thought of the man filming earlier and how that footage could be her saving grace if they tried to spin the narrative. Within a few more minutes, the female officer completed the pat-down. No contraband, no suspicious items, obviously. They rifled through her bags, flipping through documents, scanning receipts, even shaking out her makeup pouch. Nothing incriminating appeared. Mariah's entire life was on display, from personal diaries to business proposals, all scrutinized in the name of security. Finally, Officer Powell met her gaze. He looked uneasy, almost sheepish. "Ma'am, it appears there's been a misunderstanding. The individual who reported you may have given a false statement, and your name got cross-checked with a separate alert in the system. We're clearing you to proceed." Mariah's wrists were freed. The cuffs left red indentations on her skin. She massaged them absently, her chest tight with a swirling mix of relief, anger, and a longing to wake up from this nightmare. "That's all?" she asked, her voice laced with incredulity. "A misunderstanding?" Officer Powell nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I apologize for the inconvenience." "Inconvenience," she repeated, as if tasting something bitter. She considered demanding more answers, but at that moment, her phone pinged from inside her purse. She snatched it up, noticing at least a dozen missed calls and messages. Her family had already caught wind of something going viral on social media. She was in no shape to talk, not yet. "I need to speak with the airline," she said quietly, feeling the tears threaten. By the time Mariah returned to the gate, her flight had already departed. The gate area, once bustling, was empty. She sank into a nearby seat, pressing her fingertips to her temple to ward off a throbbing headache. One of the airline's floor supervisors approached her. His name tag read Shane Hargrove, Delta Supervisor. He wore an apologetic, pained expression. "Miss Benson, we're so sorry about all of this. We've rebooked you on the next flight to Los Angeles, departing in 4 hours, and we've upgraded you to a first-class seat." Mariah stared at him, numb. "I was already in business class," she muttered. "This is beyond an upgrade. This is about how your airline allowed me to be publicly humiliated." She took a shaky breath. "Has anything been done to address the false claim?" Shane cleared his throat, stepping carefully. "We're investigating that. Our corporate security is working with TSA. Please understand that the airline didn't initiate this. TSA received a tip, and they have their protocols." He sounded measured, as if reciting from a script. Mariah nodded. She knew this was standard corporate speak. She was too drained to argue further. "I'll need all the documentation of what happened," she said, summoning the last bit of her professional composure. "And I'd like to speak with someone higher up." "We can definitely arrange that," Shane replied, relief flickering in his eyes that she wasn't escalating the confrontation right there. "Let's move you to the Sky Club lounge to wait for your flight. You can have a quiet place to rest. On behalf of Delta, we sincerely apologize." Mariah exhaled, letting them whisk her away. The lounge was a calm oasis with plush seats, soft lighting, and endless coffee, but no amount of comfort could erase the humiliation of having been handcuffed at the Jetway. She pictured the phone cameras capturing her horror, the stares, the whispers. Her phone buzzed ceaselessly. Possibly the video had already gone viral, as her texts indicated. She turned off her phone and buried her face in her hands, feeling tears that she desperately tried to push back. She refused to let them flow here, under the watchful eyes of airline staff. Word travels fast, especially when it involves a dramatic airport incident caught on camera. Within hours, a clip of Mariah in handcuffs had been posted on multiple social media platforms. The hashtags were swirling, #FlyingWhileBlack, #AirportArrest, #DeltaIncident. Some initial commentary assumed she must have done something wrong. Others quickly defended her, pointing out how such incidents often stem from racial profiling. The debate raged on, fueling social media's appetite for controversy. By the time Mariah boarded her rescheduled flight, she was aware the video had over 500 views. She kept her head down, wearing a hooded sweatshirt she'd pulled from her carry-on, hoping nobody on this new flight recognized her. She barely had the energy to speak, let alone relive the nightmare in conversation with curious strangers. She forced herself to watch a movie during the flight, but her thoughts kept drifting to the humiliating scenario, the officer's hand on her wrist, the snap of the cuffs, the stares. If she closed her eyes, she could still feel the cold steel. She replayed every second, wondering what she could have done differently. And then there was the question that gnawed at her. Why had they targeted her specifically? Touching down at Los Angeles International Airport didn't bring the solace Mariah hoped for. The moment she turned her phone on, a barrage of texts, missed calls, and voicemails poured in. Her sister, her parents, colleagues from work, everyone wanted to check on her. Even her boss had left a message, saying that some media outlets had reached out to the company, asking for a statement regarding her arrest at JFK. This was bigger than a personal inconvenience. This had professional ramifications. She felt a wave of exhaustion so heavy she could barely drag herself through the terminal to find her ride. A car service was waiting to take her home, courtesy of Delta, another small perk that felt hollow in the face of what she'd endured. On the drive home, she stared out the window as the sun set over the city, painting it in warm oranges and pinks. Los Angeles usually welcomed her back with a sense of possibility. This time she felt no comfort. Instead, she dreaded the infinite cycle of phone calls and potential legal actions. She dreaded the eyes on her, the judgments. She was numb. Over the next few days, her phone didn't stop ringing. Journalists called, wanting an exclusive interview. Social media activists implored her to speak out against racial profiling. Her sister, Kiara, who was normally outspoken, had shown up at her apartment in tears after watching the video. Even her mother, who rarely used the internet, heard about the incident from local news. The entire family was riled up. Mariah's company's legal department offered her counsel if she needed it. They were concerned about reputational damage by association, but they were also keenly supportive of her. Her boss insisted she take a few days off with pay, no questions asked. She appreciated the gesture, but part of her just wanted life to go back to normal. Sleep was elusive, as nightmares replayed the moment of her detention over and over again. Meanwhile, the video soared to 1 million views. Opinion pieces sprouted like weeds, praising Mariah's composure under adversity or condemning the system that let such a travesty happen. She felt like her life wasn't her own, like the video had turned her into a symbol. On the 4th day after her ordeal, Mariah finally felt steady enough to sort through her cluttered email inbox. Among the usual marketing subscriptions and spam, one subject line jumped out: urgent request from Delta Airlines. Curious and still slightly cynical, she opened it. The message was from a woman named Danielle Parsons, an executive assistant to the CEO of Delta Airlines. The note said that the CEO, Michael L. Carmichael, a fictional name for dramatic purposes, wished to speak with Mariah directly. At first, Mariah thought it had to be a prank. Why would the CEO of such a large airline personally call her? She forwarded the message to her father, a retired attorney, asking for his advice. He called her immediately. "Honey, it might be genuine," he said. "This is a PR nightmare for them, and you've become a key figure. If you do talk to them, be careful about what you agree to. They might try to settle." Mariah's mind whirled at the possibilities. A settlement? Public apology? She never considered she might receive direct contact from the top echelons of the company. She typed a cautious reply, indicating she was open to a conversation but preferring a recorded line or a written statement. The last thing she wanted was to be misquoted or to have her words twisted. Surprisingly, within half an hour, Danielle Parsons replied, asking for Mariah's phone number and best time to call. And so, late that afternoon, Mariah found herself pacing her living room, phone in hand, waiting for a call from Michael Carmichael. When her phone vibrated, her heart jumped. She took a calming breath and answered. "Hello?" A warm, measured male voice spoke. "Miss Benson? This is Michael Carmichael, CEO of Delta Airlines. First, I want to say how sorry I am for the ordeal you've been through." Mariah swallowed, forcing composure. She had expected a corporate veneer, but the sincerity in his voice gave her pause. "Thank you for calling," she said, each word deliberate. She wanted to maintain her composure, not let her emotions run away from her. "Please, call me Michael," he said. "I've read the reports and seen the video. I can only imagine the distress and humiliation you experienced. I want to personally apologize on behalf of Delta. While the actual detention was initiated by TSA officers, we acknowledge that the gate agents and local supervisors could have intervened differently to protect your rights. We failed you, Miss Benson, and for that I'm deeply sorry." Her eyes stung with tears. Hearing the words "we failed you" sparked a mix of relief and anger. "I appreciate your apology," she managed, But a mere apology doesn't change what happened. There's a whole conversation about racial profiling and the consequences of false reporting that we need to have. Michael exhaled on the other end, as though collecting his thoughts. I agree. And I want you to know that Delta is reviewing all our procedures regarding how reports of suspicious behavior are handled. We're implementing new training for our gate agents to ensure immediate checks and balances before a passenger is singled out. We're even partnering with TSA to try and refine their alert protocols at certain airports. She nodded, remembering her father's advice to keep a record of everything. She had set her phone to record this conversation with the CEO's prior permission. That sounds like a start, she said. But you realize this isn't just about me. It's about every person who looks like me or belongs to any marginalized community who could be subjected to this. I fully recognize that, Michael said, his tone weighted with a seriousness that made her believe he might actually mean it. We are prepared to do more. One of the reasons I wanted to speak with you directly is to invite you, if you're willing to consult with our internal diversity and inclusion team, help us shape better training. You have a perspective we can't replicate. Mariah's breath caught. She hadn't expected such an offer. I'm open to it, she replied cautiously, but I hope it's not just window dressing. He gave a short, earnest laugh. I understand your skepticism. I'd feel the same way. But please, believe me when I say I want meaningful changes. And, Miss Benson, I also want to offer you compensation for your distress. If you're willing, we'd like to fly you out to our headquarters in Atlanta to discuss it in person. Of course, we'll arrange everything first-class travel, accommodations. Her thoughts raced. This was more than an apology. It was an olive branch and a promise of potential real change. But she also remembered how quickly corporate entities can revert to damage control. I'll consider your offer, she said, exhaling slowly. Thank you for reaching out, Michael. Thank you for listening, he replied. And for what it's worth, I hope we can do right by you. Let's stay in touch. After the call ended, Mariah sank onto her couch, hands trembling. She replayed every word, both stunned and cautious. This might be the first step toward justice or just another layer in a complicated saga. With the door to dialogue now open, Mariah found herself torn between wanting accountability and wanting to move on. She consulted her father and a few trusted friends. Her father believed she should negotiate for a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, not just a behind-closed-doors settlement. Her best friend, Eva, encouraged her to take any financial restitution she could get, reminding her that therapy, emotional distress, and time away from work all had costs. Her sister, Kiara, demanded that Delta donate to civil rights organizations. Make them put their money where their mouth is, Kiara said passionately. Mariah understood all these viewpoints. What she truly wanted was for no other black woman or anyone else to endure what she had. If her experience could spark change, then maybe it wasn't all in vain. The wave of public support she'd received online also pushed her to consider taking a stand. She was inundated with messages from people sharing similar stories of racial profiling, each one heartbreaking. Meanwhile, a well-known civil rights attorney in Los Angeles, Morgan Hightower, reached out, offering pro bono representation if Mariah chose to pursue legal action. The entire situation was overwhelming. She was a marketing manager, not a public figure or an activist. But the universe had thrust her into that role, and ignoring it now felt cowardly. After much deliberation, Mariah decided to accept Delta's invitation to Atlanta. Part of her wanted to see for herself whether the airline's leadership was sincere or just orchestrating a PR stunt. She spoke regularly with Danielle Parsons, the CEO's assistant, who assured her that everything from her flight to her hotel suite at the Ritz-Carlton was arranged. Walking into the Delta headquarters felt surreal. The glass-walled lobby was pristine, with sleek, modern decor. Executives in tailored suits hurried about with curated smiles. Mariah wore a crisp navy blue pantsuit, determined to present herself with confidence. A staff member escorted her to a conference room on a high floor with panoramic windows revealing the city skyline. Inside, Michael Carmichael greeted her warmly, flanked by the airline's chief diversity officer, Harriet Chung, and a few other key executives. The tension was palpable, but Michael's expression radiated earnestness. After introductions, they dove into a conversation about what had happened, how it had spiraled out of control, and how the airline could prevent such incidents in the future. Mariah laid out her concerns. Your procedures need to emphasize immediate checks before subjecting a passenger to a humiliating public spectacle. If TSA flags someone, your gate agents must step in, ask questions, verify identity, do everything possible before the situation escalates to handcuffs, especially in a jetway, in plain view of everyone. Harriet Chung nodded. We recognize that the communication breakdown between TSA and our gate staff was a major contributor. We also need to train staff on unconscious bias. Even if the TSA officer was operating on a vague tip, our gate personnel should have the awareness to question it if something doesn't seem right. The discussion continued for over an hour, delving into proposed policy changes, potential cultural sensitivity training modules, and the possibility of forming a passenger advocacy board. Mariah was impressed by the level of detail, but she remained guarded, unsure if these policies would truly take root. Then Michael leaned forward. Miss Benson, we have a compensation proposal for you. We'd like to offer a settlement that includes monetary damages for emotional distress, plus a formal public apology on our official channels. And, if you're comfortable, we'd like to include a statement from you about how we're working together to improve. We'll also commit to a significant donation to organizations that fight racial profiling. Mariah's heart fluttered. This was more than she expected. She thought of her sister's demand. That sounds positive, she said, fighting to maintain a calm facade. But the devil's in the details. What organizations, and how substantial would the donation be? Michael turned to Harriet, who passed Mariah a folder. It's all in there, Harriet said. We're proposing a $1 million donation split among the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Equal Justice Initiative, and a local Atlanta-based racial justice nonprofit. Mariah felt tears prick her eyes. This was real, tangible action. I'm grateful, she said quietly. But I need time to review this with my attorney. Michael nodded. Of course. We don't want you to feel pressured. We genuinely want to make this right. Just when Mariah thought the tide was turning, another bombshell dropped. While in Atlanta, her phone started blowing up with messages. The man who allegedly reported her at JFK, an opportunist named Todd Fletcher, had come forward in a YouTube video claiming he'd done it as a prank. He'd boasted about how easy it was to get the TSA to act on any tip involving a suspicious individual. The internet was in an uproar, and the fallout was swift. Todd Fletcher lost his job when his employer identified him in the viral video and confirmed his involvement. A statement from the company condemned his racist and malicious act. He also faced potential legal consequences for filing a false report. When Mariah learned of this, she felt a whirlwind of emotions: anger, relief that the truth was out, and a strange sense of validation. Todd's confession removed any lingering doubt about her innocence in the eyes of the public, but it also laid bare the frightening power of false accusations. The revelation spurred another wave of support for Mariah, but also opened up the question, should she personally file charges against Todd Fletcher for defamation or for the havoc he caused in her life? Her attorney, Morgan Hightower, advised that a lawsuit was entirely within her rights. Yet, Mariah hesitated. Part of her was exhausted, longing to close this chapter. In a twist of fate, what some might call calmer Todd Fletcher faced a barrage of online harassment. People recognized him on the street. He posted a tearful apology, claiming he never anticipated it would go that far. He asked for Mariah's forgiveness. She watched his video and felt torn between anger and pity. In her darkest moments, she had prayed for some cosmic justice. Now that it arrived, she realized it didn't erase the trauma she'd endured. With Todd Fletcher's confession, Delta had even more incentive to finalize the agreement with Mariah. They were determined to show they stood on the right side of justice. Mariah carefully negotiated the details with her attorney, ensuring the airline's donation commitments and public apology were explicitly stated in writing. She also insisted on a clause that required Delta to set up a specialized ombudsman office for passenger complaints related to racial discrimination. Michael Carmichael agreed. "This might even become a model for other airlines," he said. "If you'd be willing, we could use your insights for best practices." Mariah was pleasantly surprised by how receptive they were, though she couldn't help but wonder, would these policies remain in place once public interest waned? When all parties signed the agreement, Delta issued a public apology, acknowledging Mariah's experience and detailing steps for systemic improvements. Major news outlets covered the story. Some praised Delta for taking corrective action. Others criticized them for letting it happen in the first place. But for Mariah, this was a form of closure, an acknowledgement that she deserved better and that changes would be made to protect future travelers. Meanwhile, Todd Fletcher's life was in shambles. Rumors circulated that he might face criminal charges for making a false statement to federal authorities, though that would be up to the DOJ. Mariah watched from a distance, feeling conflicted. She knew some of her supporters wanted her to publicly denounce him further or file a lawsuit, but she had decided not to. He'd face enough consequences on his own. She told her sister, "I just want to move on with my life." A few weeks later, Mariah agreed to do a sit-down interview with a major television network, accompanied by her attorney. It was her first public statement since the settlement. The interviewer asked her to recount the incident. A wave of emotions rolled over her as she described the humiliation of being handcuffed in the Jetway. "I thought my life was over," she admitted, voice trembling. "In those moments, I wondered if this would end in some tragic misunderstanding." She paused. No one should have to feel like that just for boarding a plane. Her attorney chimed in, emphasizing the need for corporate accountability, stronger oversight of TSA protocols, and cautioning the public about the danger of false or biased accusations. When asked about Todd Fletcher, Mariah breathed deeply. "I don't know him personally, and I can't speak to his motives. He claims it was a prank, but the outcome was real for me. I'm thankful he came forward so people understand what happened and how easily a false claim can disrupt a life." To close the interview, the reporter asked Mariah what she wanted people to take away from her story. She gazed at the camera, summoning her courage. That we need to confront our biases, question suspicious claims, and treat each other with basic human decency. The next time you see something like this happen, don't stay silent. Speak up, because if not, it could be you, your friend, or your loved one in handcuffs, guilty of nothing more than being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mariah's interview went viral, prompting conversations about racial profiling and airport security across social media platforms. Civil rights organizations praised her courage, and some even highlighted Delta's new policies as a potential blueprint for other airlines. Mariah found herself fielding invitations to speak at conferences, diversity panels, and corporate events. For the first time, she was recognized in public spaces by strangers who offered supportive words. It was surreal. While she didn't relish the spotlight, she recognized she had a voice that people now listened to. She continued her job at the tech startup, but life felt drastically different. She was no longer just a marketing manager, she had become a reluctant activist. Yet, she discovered a sense of purpose in sharing her story and advocating for change. It was both empowering and draining. She had to find a balance so she wouldn't burn out. Meanwhile, the change at Delta seemed genuine, at least from what she could glean. Employees began reporting new anti-bias training modules. In statements to the press, they reiterated their commitment to fair and dignified treatment for every passenger. The new passenger ombudsman service received dozens of calls a week, some from travelers with legitimate complaints, others from individuals simply relieved. There was finally a place to air grievances. Whether fleeting or lasting, Mariah had sparked a shift. In the midst of a cold, drizzly afternoon, Mariah found herself at her desk, sorting through a towering stack of mail she hadn't touched in days. Most of it looked like mundane bills and marketing flyers. But there was one envelope that gave her immediate pause. Her eyes locked on the sender's name, Todd Fletcher, the man who, with a single false accusation, had upended her world in the Jetway at JFK. The same Todd who had casually confessed online that he'd reported her as a prank. She felt her stomach twist in knots. Why would he write to her now? At first, Mariah considered throwing the envelope away, perhaps even burning it. Nothing good could come of hearing his excuses. But a gnawing curiosity took hold. Had he sent a threat? Another twisted confession? A half-baked apology? The need for closure overrode her anger. With trembling fingers, she carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a single piece of paper. The letter was handwritten, an untidy scrawl that took her a moment to decipher. The words began with a rambling apology, filled with awkward pauses and countless cross-outs. It read like a man struggling to find the right tone, unsure if an apology could ever be enough. Todd admitted that he had lost his job shortly after the viral video revealed his prank. His co-workers had turned on him, his employer had fired him for misconduct, and even some of his close friends had distanced themselves. In fact, he wrote, he'd moved out of his old apartment because of constant harassment and fear for his own safety. Strangers had doxed him on social media, and he'd even received menacing messages from people furious about what he had done to Mariah. He confessed that he'd initially watched the backlash unfold from a place of wounded pride, trying to justify his actions to himself. But slowly, under the crushing weight of public scrutiny, he claimed to have realized the full magnitude of his wrongdoing. The letter stretched on for several pages, describing how he'd sought help therapists, support groups, and even a diversity workshop. He wrote that he had grown up in a small, insular community where certain stereotypes were rarely questioned, and he recognized now how easily he had let those biases slip into a prank that nearly ruined someone else's life. The heartbreak he felt at losing his livelihood and friends, he wrote, paled in comparison to the anguish he imagined Mariah must have endured. As she read, Mariah's emotions whirled: shock, anger, pity, and a glimmer of validation all collided in her chest. She reread certain sentences, searching for sincerity. The once cold feeling in her fingertips gave way to a subtle trembling. Todd Fletcher claimed he was truly sorry, a phrase he repeated multiple times in different ways. "I'm so sorry this happened. I'm sorry I put you through that. I wish I could go back and undo it all." He ended by expressing his hope that Mariah would someday find it in her heart to forgive him, though he admitted he would understand if she never could. Mariah leaned back in her chair, the letter dangling loosely in her hands. A swirl of conflicting thoughts rushed through her mind. Part of her wanted to tear the paper into tiny pieces, scatter them in the trash, and let her anger burn bright enough to sear this entire chapter from her memory. After all, his prank had cost her so much: sleepless nights, nightmares, time in therapy, and a wrenching confrontation with both corporate and legal systems. No letter could make up for that. Yet another part of her, a quieter but insistent voice, recognized something else. This letter was a living testament to how ignorance, indifference, and unexamined bias could cause catastrophic harm. It also proved that Todd had faced his own kind of reckoning. She didn't believe people deserved unlimited sympathy for destructive behavior, but perhaps in taking accountability, he had at least set foot on the path toward real change. Could that be worth acknowledging? She paced her apartment, letter still in hand, trying to decide what to do. Her feet carried her to the kitchen, then the living room, then back again. She called her attorney, Morgan Hightower, and read sections of the letter aloud, her voice at times quivering with frustration and disbelief. Morgan listened intently, his tone measured as usual. "This is entirely your call," he said after a long silence. "As your counsel, I recommend you hold on to it in case there's ever a legal reason to reference his admission of guilt. But beyond that, there's no obligation to respond. Legally or morally, you don't owe him anything." Mariah hung up the call, feeling somewhat relieved. She set the letter on her dining table and stared at it for a while, her mind drifting back to the moment the TSA officer snapped handcuffs around her wrists. She remembered the terror of not knowing how the situation would end, the humiliation of those phone cameras pointed at her, the heartbreak in her mother's voice when she saw the footage online. All of it triggered by Todd Fletcher's so-called prank. She found herself whispering aloud, "Why do I still feel responsible for his pain? Why should I even care what happens to him?" It was an internal battle. Her sense of empathy fought against the desire for righteous retribution. In some twisted way, Todd Fletcher had become an uninvited character in her life story, a man who, despite having no place in her personal circle, had inflicted some of the deepest harm she'd ever known. Even as she entertained the idea of responding, she felt exhaustion creep into her bones. Maintaining her role as a voice for racial justice was already taking a toll. She was giving interviews, consulting with Delta on anti-bias training, and juggling new responsibilities at work. Adding a personal correspondence with Todd Fletcher felt like one emotional burden too many. Days turned into a week before she fully decided. The letter remained on her table during that time, catching her eye as she cooked dinner or walked by with a load of laundry. Sometimes she'd pick it up and reread a passage or two, searching for a sign that might tilt her decision in one direction. The lines about his remorse, about how he struggled to sleep at night, knowing what he'd done, those gave her a fleeting sense of satisfaction. He was finally grappling with the consequences of his actions. Yet she sensed an undercurrent of self-pity, a longing for absolution that only she could grant. In the end, she penned a brief response on a piece of scrap paper, a letter that would remain unsent. In it, she thanked him for acknowledging his mistakes, but also stated that his remorse did not erase the trauma he had caused. She wrote, "Sometimes sorry isn't enough," and reminded him that she was not his savior, nor a confessor meant to release him from guilt. When she finished writing, she folded the note and tucked it beside his letter. Whether she'd ever mail it, she still didn't know. Ultimately, Mariah chose to heed her attorney's advice, to keep Todd's letter for her records but not reply. She placed it in the same folder holding all the airport incident documents, legal correspondence, and news clippings, a grim time capsule of an event that changed her life. Todd Fletcher's remorse, however sincere or desperate, was not her burden to alleviate. She had come too far, fought too hard, and endured too many sleepless nights to shoulder the emotional labor of mending him. If he truly sought redemption, he would have to find it on his own. Still, every now and then, she would wonder late at night, when old anxieties stole her sleep. What Todd Fletcher's life looked like now. She imagined him in a humble apartment, perhaps scanning job ads by lamplight, grappling with guilt and shame. She even wondered if he would attend more diversity workshops, or maybe volunteer for a civil rights organization in a bid to learn from his mistake. She didn't know, and perhaps she never would. One thing was clear: his misguided and malicious act had forced both of them to stare into the deep recesses of society's biases. In some strange backward way, he had become a catalyst for change, at least within Delta's system, and maybe even beyond. But Mariah knew she never asked for such a catalyst, and she certainly didn't need him to bring about her growth. Her life was moving forward on her own terms, fueled by her own ambition and courage. Standing by her window one evening, watching the city lights twinkle, she vowed to turn this chapter into a lesson. That bigotry can sometimes be so brazen and so thoughtless that it collapses under its own weight, the moment it's exposed to scrutiny. That even those who cause pain might one day, in the quiet of their own regrets, reach out in desperation to the people they wronged. And that sometimes the strongest choice is simply to keep walking, leaving them behind. Months passed, and life gradually found a new normal. Mariah still had flashbacks, moments when she'd feel an unexpected surge of anxiety while walking through an airport or seeing a police officer. Therapy helped, as did the support of loved ones and the knowledge that her experience had not gone unnoticed or unaddressed. She channeled her energy into constructive avenues, occasionally consulting with Delta on their diversity training, as they had requested. She also became an advocate with the ACLU, speaking at panels that discussed reforms in airport security protocols. Amidst all the activism, she still managed to excel in her marketing career, receiving another promotion. Although the entire ordeal had started with heartbreak and humiliation, it had also steered her toward a sense of purpose she never expected to find. Karma had its say on all fronts on Todd Fletcher, who faced the downfall of his life due to his malicious prank on Delta, which had to confront its shortcomings publicly and implement real changes, and on Mariah, who emerged stronger, more determined, and more compassionate than ever. In the end, what began as a nightmare in a jetway led to a nationwide conversation about equity, security, and the power of a single voice. Thank you for staying with us through this roller coaster story of injustice, triumph, and redemption. Mariah Benson's ordeal at JFK revealed the glaring gaps in airport security protocols and the devastating impact of false, biased accusations. Yet it also showcased the resilience of a single individual who refused to be silenced. From a public shaming in handcuffs to a personal call from the CEO of Delta Airlines, Mariah's journey reminds us that one spark can ignite significant change if we have the courage to speak out and stand up for what's right. If this story moved you or opened your eyes to real-world issues of discrimination and injustice, please consider liking this video, sharing it with friends, and subscribing to the channel. By spreading these stories, we can create more awareness and push for the kind of meaningful changes that protect everyone. Stay vigilant, stay compassionate, and thank you for watching.